visit with you today. I don't know if you have a particular format. Would you want me to
yeah,
say a few words?
let me give you a disclaimer here first. I had set up a 10 o'clock appointment in Marion with one of our bigger advertisers, and I called to confirm, and it could go either way, so I will get a silent text one way or the other. So if I run screaming from the room, it's likely not anything you said. Yeah, the format generally is we give you a few minutes to kind of talk about, in your case, what you have accomplished and why you think 4 more years is a good thing, and we'll take it from there.
Well, I took over at a very difficult time in our state's history, and I think I've rescued Illinois from very serious problems. Our economy was, with the rest of the states of America, in very difficult straits. Unemployment in Illinois went up to 11.4. Right now it's 6.6. We've had the steepest decline in unemployment of any state in the union in the last half year or so. Matter of fact, last month we created more jobs than any state except Texas in the whole country. In the last 2 months, it's been 40,000 jobs. I read the front page of your paper. My opponent talks about jobs and growing the economy. I guess he did it in Anna yesterday. I was in a debate with him on Monday. Couldn't name one business that created one job under his jurisdiction. He was repeatedly asked by the reporters, talk about your private business success at growing jobs. Couldn't name one company. I can name a lot of things that we've done, including our Illinois Jobs Now. We got past 10 weeks after I became governor. We didn't have a capital bill in our state for 10 years. I got it done in 10 weeks. And it's definitely helped Southern Illinois. Transportation education building, which is a very important new part of campus. That was because of that law. We're widening Route 13, going to widen also I-57 and some other intersection improvements there. We've used money from that capital bill to build schools in Southern Illinois, including in Marion, Vernon, Pinckneyville, DuQuoin, Union County, Carterville. All those are new schools that weren't done until we got the bill passed and into law. And I think that's important. I think it relates to budget in general. I believe in laying out a specific, concrete budget, and I did that this spring. It does retain the current income tax rate, which is 5%. It does, in that same proposal, include guaranteed property tax relief for every homeowner in Illinois. Be a $500 refund every year, dealing with the fact that our state relies too much on property taxes to fund schools. We also proposed improving the value of the Earned Income Tax Credit, which is tax relief for working families. I've already, since I've been governor, we've increased the amount on the Earned Income Tax Credit from 5% to 10%, and under my proposal we go from 10% to 20%. That's the best way, using the tax system, to give tax relief to families making less than $50,000 raising children. And it makes our tax code a lot fairer. For Southern Illinois, my opponent's plan, if you want to call it that, I don't really understand exactly what he's saying today on the budget. He wants to roll back the income tax. It will cause severe harm to our schools and to our health care and to our public safety, to helping our veterans, and everything else we do. As a matter of fact, if this phone rings and I have to deal with Ebola today with our Director of Public Health, we've got to have money for that. We've got to have money for our Emergency Management Agency. Now, frankly, it's not fun going around saying we need money for government. But if you don't have a government that takes care of education, and especially in this region where we've invested heavily in the university as the #1 employer here. Unemployment in Jackson County, today it's 5.8%. That's below the national average. It was, in bad times, 9.5. No, so we're on a comeback trail in Illinois. Jobs are up, unemployment is down, and we have a lot more work to do. Now, we'll go way back, if we adopt the plan of my opponent, which is to severely cut the state budget. Cutting the income tax the way he proposes will lose Illinois about $8 billion. And you can talk about growth all you want. Go to Kansas and find out what that policy produces. In Kansas, you had a candidate much like my opponent who talked about cutting taxes, income tax and such, and now they have a huge deficit, and their economy hasn't grown. You have to invest in education if you're going to be successful in a 21st century economy based on information, and I do believe in that. I do want to say a couple other things and then answer all questions. The Affordable Care Act has been a very big success in Illinois. We have 700,000 people who have gotten coverage in about a year's time. My opponent would have turned that down just like they did in Missouri, turned down the money in Indiana, and turned down the money in Wisconsin. All those states did not accept the money to insure more people. And this is a very important part of our economy. I've invested from our state in all the critical access hospitals in Southern Illinois to make sure they have enough resources to do their job, and they're big employers in the community. And now we have more people covered by health care. And I believe in a wellness society, preventing bad things from happening in the first place. And the key to that is to have access to health care for our folks. In the matter of veterans, we believe strongly in our programs that involve helping veterans returning. We have a program called Warrior Assistance Program that makes sure that every member of our National Guard on a regular basis is tested for post-traumatic stress disorder. And we have to have these programs if we're going to be a decent state. I was at Red Lake College a couple of years ago, and I was with 15 veterans. Many of them, they didn't have a job. And we put a program together to have a welding program so they learned how to be welders. And then I got a text message from one of them, and he said, I got a job, I got a paycheck, and I got some hope. Before they were having some tough times. They were drinking too much after coming back from combat. So to me, the real test in this election, reading just what was said in Anna, I don't think rescuing Illinois' budget and paying down the bills, we're not to a 30-day cycle yet, but we're very close. If we adopt the budget ideas of the other side, we'll go right back up to only owing $10 billion and not investing in important things that make a difference in life. So our economy is doing better. I think it will continue to do better if we stick to the key tough decisions I had to make as governor in the last 5 years. Go ahead and answer any questions you have here.
Well, I'm going to have to split, so I'm going to ask a question first, which is in light of kind of the history of the person who's been in the governor's chair over the years and your immediate predecessor, could you comment on yesterday's ruling regarding patronage?
Well, when I guess going back, when I became governor, I issued an executive order making it crystal clear to all agencies that they could not hire anyone that was not compliant with court rulings in the past. The case is called Rutan. A policymaker, you can pick who you want, but if it's a non-Rutan job, then they had to adhere to those policy rules. I did that my first few months as governor. The Department of Transportation did not comply with that executive order. I extended to the Inspector General of our state the authority to oversee any non-compliance with hiring rules. And the Inspector General did a report on the Department of Transportation and ascertained that the department did not comply with those rules. The moment I got that report from the Inspector General, I acted on every single one of the recommendations, replaced the Secretary of Transportation, the decorated veteran, who will comply with those rules. The Inspector General determined that there was no inappropriate conduct by anybody on my staff. The department did not properly classify workers in this area of policy and non-policy. And yesterday there was a decision to have a monitor which we will comply with directly, and make sure that the policies that I've enunciated from day one, that we repeated this summer. When we got the report of the Inspector General, I not only carried out all their recommendations, but proposed a merit board for the Department of Transportation. It hasn't ever existed. And we issued a directive that the staff assistant position be abolished. Those who were in it were going to be let go. And the Secretary of Transportation is Erica Borgren. She served in Iraq, led a command in Korea, was first in her class at West Point, earned a Rhodes Scholarship, and she was our Director of Veterans Affairs for the last several years, and she follows the rules, and that's what I want done at all times. I would say this: when anything goes bad or doesn't go in the right direction, I take action. I get to the bottom of it, and we fix the problem. By contrast, if you look at my opponent, when things go bad in his business, including hiring people who are going to jail now, he's had 12 bankrupt companies. 6 of those executives have gone to jail. 2 are under indictment. There's no responsibility taken. Take the money and leave. I believe in taking responsibility, and I think every part of government, that's your number one job.
They'll carry on.
Okay.
You mentioned the property tax relief. Is that money, would that money be rebated from the state? And where would that money come from?
Well, our state constitution says the state of Illinois has a primary responsibility for funding schools. And I feel that's what we ought to do. So I believe in an income tax based on ability to pay is the best way to fund our schools, not property tax, which is not based on ability to pay. So I feel, in my budget, I laid out that if we maintain the income tax rate where it is today, we could also not only properly pay for schools from the state, but also on an annual basis to more than 2 million homeowners in our state, residential property taxpayers, give a $500 a year annual property tax refund. It's a refund from the state to kind of deal with the fact that we have high property taxes in Illinois over many, many decades. And I think it's a direct way to deal with this issue, a fair way. Now, it wasn't just me saying this, but 3 credit rating agencies that every governor has to deal with said that the plan I outlined was affordable, reasonable, would pay down the bills, properly invest in education and health care, and also provide targeted tax relief. To me, that's what we should do. Targeted tax relief to people who need it the most. And in my opponent's plan, he'd get over $1 million tax cut. I don't think that's the fair way to go. I think we should help parents raising children who are paying, in many cases, property taxes for schools. The state should pay more for education. And I paid the pension amount for required under the law of our state. I'm the only governor who's ever done that. That's why we had a $100 billion liability. I inherited that, and we've had to deal with that. But every year I've been governor, the 5 years, we put the proper amount in the pension fund. And that's part of also maintaining our revenue. That's why the credit rating agencies, I think, said very positive things about our budget. That it is designed to move Illinois forward and be responsible. To be irresponsible is run around the state and say, we're going to freeze property taxes and we're going to lower the income tax and have no specifics whatsoever on how you're going to pay for our schools.
Why the rebate to the property, to the taxpayers? Why not make the money just available to the schools? And that way, if they needed more funding or whatever, they could manipulate their rates.
Well, I think part of the problem is that you want to have a specific, concrete way of showing the public that using the income tax system is a fair way to go. The Illinois income tax, even at 5%, is lower than Kentucky, Missouri, Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, all those states. I think in Indianapolis, they have a local income tax, if we put it all together, they're above 5%. So, you know, in Missouri, it's 6%, okay? I don't like, who likes taxes? But you gotta have a fair way of digging Illinois out of a hole. The hole was billions of dollars of unpaid bills, pension amounts never paid properly, you know, and our schools underfunded by the state. So I think, you know, I believe in, before an election, as I did last time, telling people I supported the income tax. I did it last time, and I did it, you know, and it was not easy. It was a Tea Party year, but this university and this community, which is really a regional place, SIU is the biggest employer in all of Southern Illinois, and it's a key to our economic growth in Southern Illinois for decades to come. I believe in investing in education. My opponent will have severe cuts. There's no way you can cut the income tax the way he's proposed and have proper revenue for higher education or for the scholarships. You know, many of the students who were at the university have MAP scholarships. These are state of Illinois scholarships to students in need. We do about 140,000 students a year, close to $400 million. We won't be able to maintain that. We should double that. In my budget, the one I outlined, and we had a 5-year blueprint on how to do this, we would greatly increase early childhood education and our scholarships for students who are in need to go to college. That's investing in human resources and human minds that will make a difference for a lifetime. We put more money into the early childhood education budget than any other time in Illinois history. Now, for those who are billionaires running around Illinois saying that you know, the state will radically cut our state budget, we won't have that money for kids. I think that's not responsible, and that's where I'm coming from. Say couple more things about Southern Illinois. There was a tornado last November. I was in Brookport. There was another tornado the year before in Harrisburg. I was in Harrisburg. And there's been a number of natural disasters. A horizontal hurricane this year. That's back in 2010 or whenever it was. And, you know, that's another reason why you have to have a proper budget. It's, you know, reckless to say we can slash our resources and somehow have the same emergency management agency that had to be here during a flood, during a drought, during a tornado, during an ice storm that occurred right after I got sworn in, during that horizontal hurricane or whatever they called it. You know, so I think it's important for this region to have proper investment by state government. Someone runs around Illinois and says we're going to cut the budget and then also raise funding for schools. How? I mean, you can't do that. He says growth. That's what they said in Kansas. Take a look at what's going on in Kansas today. You don't, we're growing our economy. Our economy is definitely doing much better. We have a long way to go. But you need public investment to continue that growth.
Can you talk specifically about jobs in Southern Illinois? I mean, there are still pockets in this region where unemployment is still very high.
Right, I agree with that. That's why I believe in public works. We won't be able to issue bonds to build roads and bridges, and we've done quite a bit in Southern Illinois. In almost every single county, there's been significant investment in transportation. Same way with respect to our rail system. We believe in Amtrak and getting students back and forth, and we believe in rail in general. Make sure we have freight rail. It's second to none. I invested with respect to broadband. It's called Clearwave in all 23 counties in Southern Illinois. We invested about $45 million to build a broadband network, much more fiber. I think it's about 700 miles of fiber. This is the economy of the now and in the future. And so we want to make sure Southern Illinois has the infrastructure to benefit from that. And that creates jobs in doing it, whether you're laying fiber, or building roads, or building schools. We've done more school building in Southern Illinois than any other time, I think, in state history. not only grammar schools and high schools, but major building here at SIU Carbondale. And I think that's the best way to lay a foundation from government on helping economic growth, building infrastructure, and then also investing in human infrastructure, human minds, and that's what education is, and having decent health care. And investing, as we have in our Affordable Care Act, has created jobs. Now, I know there are pockets, and I believe that, one of the best ways that we can address that is making sure we have good community colleges. We have over 1 million students in Illinois going to community college, 48 of them in our state. We've invested in John A. Logan, Red Lake, Southeastern. These are key places where folks who need a job and maybe need skills for that job can get those skills over and over again. But if we don't invest in those community colleges, we won't have that opportunity. Illinois today, we have a job link in our state Department of Employment Security. We have over 200,000 openings for good jobs, but there, you have to have the skills to fill them. And so I used to teach community college, and I taught at night, and I know how hard people work and want to improve themselves, and that's why we have to invest in community colleges. Again, a radical, severe, extreme cut in the budget and saying that somehow it'll all be made up by growth is not going to happen. It's better for public government to make sure we properly fund our schools from birth to college.
Can you speak a little bit on your thoughts on minimum wage?
Well, I believe in raising the minimum wage. I believe at least to $10 an hour. In this region, that would help a lot of families, quite a few. And the studies that have been made, including by the Federal Reserve Bank, are that one of the best ways to stimulate and grow the economy is to raise the minimum wage. About 70% of our economy in Illinois and in America is consumer-driven, consumer spending. And a lot of folks who make modest wages, $8.25 an hour, if they got a raise, they do not admire money in a bank vault. They spend the money quickly for their family and locally. So I believe that is not only socially just, the right thing to do. The minimum wage is not kept up with the cost of living. But at the same time, it also helps our economy. It helps especially children. 60% of the minimum wage earners are women, most of them heads of household. The idea that they're teenagers is completely false. They're heads of households and adults. And if we want to help children in these households, there's two ways to do it. One is raise the minimum wage, especially for feminine workers, as they say, 60% that are heads of household and raising kids. The second way is what I outlined earlier, improve the value of the earned income tax credit on our state income tax. We've done that once. I raised it from 5% to 10%. My budget that I proposed would go from 10% to 20%. That's a targeted way of helping families who make less than $50,000 a year and are raising children get tax relief. There's a federal earned income tax credit supported by both Democrats and Republicans over the years, and there's one here, and we want to make it more generous. If you want to really help kids in school and their ability to go forward in life, help their parents have more purchasing power through the minimum wage, through earned income tax credit, and having a growing economy. We had to battle hard. I didn't create the Great Recession. When I took office, you had the state budget underwater, the Great Recession, and one governor going to jail and another one in jail. And we've had to take each of these challenges on, and we have. And I think it's very important that we maintain that approach. The other side, they're not very specific at all about their budget plans in particular, other than cutting.
Talk about pensions, Senate Bill 1, that situation. A lot of people in Southern Illinois work as school teachers, principals, administrators, or in the prison system, and feel like promises were made to them along their career and then broken. And how do you justify that to them?
Well, number one, I pay the pension amount every year. Right now our state has to invest over $6 billion out of our budget just to pay a proper actuarial amount for the pension.
Is that to get caught up, or is that just to?
Well, that's what's required,
Okay.
yeah. Now, there's no question that pension reform was necessary because we had a $100 billion liability from previous governors and legislators who didn't pay the proper amount year after year. This accumulated, was a cloud over our economy, and I took action. Now, it was bipartisan, the pension reform. It was very difficult. My opponent on the eve of the vote was trying to wreck the plan and sabotage the bill. He got the Republican leaders quite unhappy about it. They had worked so hard on it. But we got it done. I signed it into law, and it's now before the courts. Now, what I did in getting the pension reform is try to help workers who had modest pensions, have very few changes to their pension. For those who are a little bit higher on the receiving pension amounts, there are some changes. They're reasonable. It basically deals with the cost of living adjustment. It isn't an automatic 3% a year that existed prior to the law. And so we had to erase this liability. Otherwise, the pension would continue to take more and more money out of education, healthcare, human services. And
Do you still feel like it's constitutional?
yeah, no, that's why I signed it. Yeah, I advocated for it. I signed it into law. The majority of the legislature found it constitutional, and the courts will decide. I believe it will be upheld.
What's Plan B if it's not?
Well, then, I happen to be a lawyer. You don't exactly give out your strategy of Plan B if you had a case before the court. I said in the debate the other night, if there is a court decision and a blueprint, you follow the blueprint. My view is, and the Attorney General feels the same way I do, that the law is constitutional. It clearly was an emergency. We had to deal with a severe problem that was harming our economy and our budget. And the changes basically are fairly modest for most everybody in terms of their pension amount. There are changes, I don't deny that, but they're not severe. And when you put it to the side of, are we going to invest in schools and healthcare and public safety? We've got to do that. If we have an Ebola crisis, I hope not. We've got to have a public health department that's second to none. We are very blessed to have right now an emergency management agency and a public health department that are superior. But I don't want to see radical cuts in their budget because they are folks that we have to have when it counts. Same way with our Department of Military Affairs. My opponent gets in. There's going to be radical cuts in that department as well as veterans, and we won't be able to have as many armories in our state. We got to deal with that.
The fracking law that was passed in Illinois is widely touted as the best in the country. There are still plenty of us who are living in this area who will be faced with living with that. If fracking was to take place next to your home, how comfortable would you be with it under this law?
Well, I did sign the law, and I only signed it because the environmental community in Illinois, both north and south, they did not oppose the law. And I asked them over and over again. And we had lots of negotiations in getting the law passed. And when I signed it, it had support. Now, under the law, you have to put together rules of how this carries out. Now, I have a very good director of natural resources. His name is Mark Miller. We've been able to buy a lot of open space in Southern Illinois under his leadership, my direction. And Mark was responsible for listening to all the comments on the rules. And there were thousands and thousands. Now, the pro-fracking forces said, forget about it, just get it going. I always thought that was so imprudent because we should carefully follow the law that was passed, listen and react to every single comment, no matter how difficult it was time consuming. We got that done. And there were some changes and that we presented to the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules, where it is now at. But the forces that are saying, just go forward you know, without thinking or without looking carefully at things, I don't think they're correct. Procedurally, they're very incorrect, because if we are going to do fracking in Illinois and do it right, you don't want to have some procedural mistake made by our department that somebody goes to court with a lawsuit and stops the whole process, then in its tracks, and that could happen. By carefully following all the rules, listening to everyone, making sure it's done right, which is what we're doing, I think is the best way to go. And there may be opportunities in southeastern Illinois at the New Albany Reservoir there. We have a very deep reservoir. There may be some real opportunities. It's got to be done right. Can't harm the water of Southern Illinois or any other community.
Senator Durbin was here not too long ago, and we asked him about fracking, and one of the things he said was that it shouldn't be conducted in environmentally sensitive areas. And I posed the question to him about whether that would include areas that rely solely on groundwater for their water supply.
Mm-hmm.
And he, while not being extremely definitive, tended to agree with that. Would that be something that you would be comfortable with?
Yeah, I think actually our rule making has really moved in that very direction you talked about. You know, some of the pro-fracking forces, they're all supporting my opponent. He had a big fundraiser, I think it was up in Mount Vernon. They raised an incredible amount of money to an opponent who's giving himself $1.5 million almost every day. I am not going to be stampeded by any special interest that doesn't want to follow the precise rules that were passed by the legislature and then are part of our rulemaking by the agency that's going to carry this out. I do want to say one thing, by the way. I just thought about it on this whole spending thing. I'm heavily outspent in the election, but we had a rule, a law that I signed after years and years. Illinois was called the Wild West on campaign finance, and we finally passed limits. And I abided by those limits for about 3 years. And my opponent broke the limits, and under the law, if self-funder breaks the limits, they go away for everyone. But I thought that was very, very sad indeed. We passed all these ethics standards and laws after I came in, and I enforced them. We passed recall amendment. But campaign finance in particular was designed to try and make sure we didn't have the kind of special interest financing and the kind of spending that's going on now. You got to defend yourself. I've been called out of names here for more than a year in this election. I believe I get a tough eye. You can call me all the names you want. But my goal is to rescue Illinois from a budget deficit that we never had before, that I inherited when I became governor. The worst economy in our country since the Great Recession. The only person I know went through the Great Recession is my mother, who was 97. She turned 97, and she went through the Great Depression. But that recession was very difficult for Illinois and America, and we had to rescue our state from that. And we did it by doing important investments in public works, important investments in education. My opponent goes around and says, I cut education in the classroom. Every independent fact checker has said we increased classroom spending by over about roughly $500 million. To me, that's emblematic of his campaign. You got to tell the truth. And the truth is, despite all the hard times, we still invested in education, and our proposed budget for this fiscal year and the coming 5 years will greatly invest in classroom education and early childhood and community colleges and four-year public universities and those scholarships that I talked about earlier. These are very important at university. I think it's 4,000 students at SIU get scholarships under MAP, our state program. And they couldn't go to college if they didn't have that. And to slash that is very short-sighted.
In Southern Illinois, thousands of people work at our prisons, as I'm sure you're aware.
Right.
Addressed a couple issues with that. One, we had a story recently about this being the second year that overtime topped $60 billion. And along those lines, are people in our Southern Illinois prisons working too much? Are we safe? How are you going to address the overcrowding issue? What's going on with that situation?
Well, again, in the budget, you have to have a budget for corrections, and it's a very important department. I don't believe slashing the budget of corrections, as my opponent's budget would do, will help anybody. It'll make things less safe. Now, we have made changes, and it's important that we understand that anybody who's, if we had to close a facility, they were offered another job in corrections or in juvenile justice in the system within this region. You know, Murfreesboro had no prisoners, no juveniles, and we closed that down. There's a facility in Harrisburg for juveniles. Now, in my budget this past year, I proposed that we repurpose Murfreesboro to another purpose in corrections. Specifically, I think it had to do with those who had DUIs and trying to remedy the situation of repeat offenders. And so that would repurpose Murfreesboro. I'm always interested if there's an opportunity to repurpose a facility, and I think with respect to corrections, I'm supported by the union that represents the security guards, prison guards. They've obviously had differences with me, but they see what the difference is between me and my opponent. I believe in properly investing in corrections. Related to that, we have two programs that are vital for funding. One is called Redeploy, which makes sure that those who have committed offenses but are nonviolent, there may be other alternative ways of punishing them other than state prison. We've invested heavily in that. We've reduced recidivism considerably, and we keep some folks out of state prison, and they're punished a different way. Also related to that is what's called reentry. When prisoners are done their time, when they come back to the community, we don't want them to repeat offenses and return to prison. So we invest in programs to get prisoners jobs and an opportunity in civilian life when they come home. And you have to invest in those programs, but they pay dividends in the sense that you have folks who don't repeat crimes, and we've been able to do that, especially in the juvenile area. We've reduced the prison population considerably by Redeploy and programs that don't just incarcerate young people who make mistakes, but give them other ways of changing their behavior and also having consequences. So that's where I'm coming from. You got to invest in this if you're going to really have a state population and prisons go down.
Would you ever, the license plate surcharge kind of breathe new life in the DNR?
Yes.
Missouri's DNR is widely held as one of the best in the country, and they have dedicated sales tax.
Yeah.
Would that be something?
I think it'd be probably not something we would do. What we did is, you know, we had a surcharge, a couple of bucks on the license plates of Illinois. That has provided significant new funding to the Department of Natural Resources, and they have been able to make investments. When I began as governor, we had 7 parks closed, and many of them under manned. And we've been able, by improving the budget and more efficiency, change that around. There is dedicated funding now through this license plate charge for doing something very important. You know, a lot of folks in our state, they can't take vacations out to big state parks in the West, or national parks in the West. So it's here, pockets of wilderness that we have, and we've got to really invest in those. And you know, that's what Mark Miller and our director has done. We bought very recently bought open space, very big purchase, and I think that's quite popular with the public, that we need to have places for parks and recreation. And in the jobs bill that we passed 10 weeks after I became governor, we put about $50 million into investing in parks. And that pays great dividends in jobs and helping people, have a good standard of living, And so I think that's sort of where we'd be going on the whole conservation. I'm the greenest governor Illinois has ever had. I don't want to pat myself on the back, but I believe in energy efficiency, so I'm going to do it at the university in a few minutes. Renewable energy, Illinois has made great strides, and water conservation. This is very, very important. We have a clean water initiative. Murfreesboro is gonna get a grant under it's a $2 billion investment in clean water. It's water mains, wastewater treatment, water tanks, storage. You know, we've got to invest in water, and you mentioned groundwater earlier. That is the oil of the 21st century, and protecting our water is quite important to me. Our EPA is very vigilant there, and we also make investments in water mains that are quite old and need to be repaired and made 21st century ready. And that goes with the internet. You know, this program we did, I remember being here when we announced it with Clearwave, $45 million investment in 23 counties in Southern Illinois for connectivity, high-speed internet. It helps our hospitals, our schools, teleeducation, and then also our law enforcement, and definitely our businesses. We've got to be linked up. And, you know, the notion that you just slash things and have extreme cuts, that's my opponent. And, you know, that's where, you know, you go take a look at what he said in the primary and the general. You know, that is very short-sighted, and it will produce harm, not growth. Okay. I'm looking at my list to see if I forgot anything. Okay, we're doing. There's a regional emergency management building we're going to build over at the airport here for the whole region. Having been here quite a few times on natural disasters, we understand how important it is to have regional cooperation. I think that's big. And I would say also more school construction. That's something I feel strongly about. You know, we have quite a few schools that are outdated. But just to read the list off, 48 million to Mount Vernon, 14 to Pinckneyville, 22 to Carterville, 12 million to DuQuoin, 3 million to Benton, 50 million to Marion, 2 million to Union County. Those are all investments in school construction, and that creates jobs and also in a learning environment that's ready for the 21st century.
Do you still believe Murray Development Center should close? In brief,
Yeah. Well, here's my view on that. Illinois was the most institutionalized state in the union by far for people with developmental disabilities, and I don't think that's right. There's a federal court case called Olmstead that said that people with disabilities should be given choice and freedom of choice, and they should not be segregated. And our state was frankly segregating people in these institutions, and I've closed several of them. One in Jacksonville, another one called Howe up in Tinley Park, and I proposed that we close Murray. Now, that doesn't mean that families that prefer that setup can't choose other institutions that we have in our state. We still have about 5 or so. But I believe in community care. And I think most parents believe in this as well. And community care is when you close an institution, you don't just take that money and put it in some other initiative. You take all the money you save and plow it back into community care for those with disabilities. You know, I'll give you Jacksonville. That's already been closed. Eddie Fleming, he's a fellow who was in Jacksonville for 12 years. Highly segregated. Now he lives in Springfield in a group home with a porch where he can play his guitar. He can walk around the neighborhood. He chooses when he wants to eat breakfast, when he wants to eat lunch, when he wants to eat dinner. I had him come to the State of the Union. You know, he has more freedom. He has a chance to get a job. And I believe in, for developmental disabilities, an employment first concept. And we've been able to get jobs for people so they have fulfilling lives. And, you know, with respect to those at Murray, there are some, obviously, that are opposed to closing that. But that's part of our policy of, we call it rebalancing, community care, living in the community, having much more freedom and choice. That, to me, is the right way to go. And I get, you know, yelled at, but that's part of the job, you know. If you can't handle the heat, then get out of this kitchen. And I've had standing ovations, and no, I'll probably have a few more coming up. But if you don't have a governor who's willing to make tough decisions, who doesn't just talk about easy street, you know, I think my opponent's Mr. Easy Street, I believe in making tough decisions for the future, for everybody to have a better future. And one of my classmates, so to speak, was here in Illinois day before yesterday. I went to Georgetown. I was a freshman. Bill Clinton was a senior. We didn't know each other really, but he knew he won the Rhodes Scholarship when he was a senior at our school. But he said yesterday, there's a lot of background music in campaigns. In this paper, you've been a regional champion for years and years. I used to live in Edwardsville. But what President Clinton said, I think we should always keep in mind. Don't stop thinking about tomorrow. What's the future? Which candidate is best for the future? The fellow I'm running against, in a debate, was asked 3 or 4 times the other night, name one company that's created one job, and he couldn't name one. He talks about a growing economy, yeah, but if you look at how they did their work in his business, it was shipping jobs overseas, laying off workers, stripping down companies. That's what that's all about. We have a different approach. Investing in education and public construction, and we've been able to help our economy go forward. Long way to go. Still more work to do. But slashing SIU Carbondale's budget is prescription for disaster.
Along the lines of the nastiness of this campaign, can you, again, very briefly, just comment on Dave McKinney's resignation yesterday from the Sun-Times and what that says about this election?
Well, I know Dave McKinney. I've known him about all the time he's been a reporter. He's a very good reporter. He doesn't always write stories that please me, but he's an outstanding person and reporter. And basically, that kind of intimidation that was used to try and silence him, my opponent in his my opponent has done that elsewhere. I think in particular this lawsuit that was filed by companies called Leap Source. He threatened a female CEO in that company. He calls it a frivolous lawsuit, but he had to pay $500,000 to settle the case. Most people wouldn't call that frivolous. And basically, he made, the investigation by the Sun-Times, Dave McKinney, and Channel 5 in Chicago found that, he said things to her that were most inappropriate. He would bankrupt her, he would bury her, hurt her family if necessary. That's not right, and people need to know about it. Dave McKinney is a truth teller, and he's a whistleblower, and clearly what happened at the Sun-Times, I think it was a sad day for journalism in America, let alone our own state. You need fearless reporters who write about the truth. So Dave McKinney did. Rauner campaign didn't like that and tried to intimidate him, and I think they did things wrong. Okay? All right, you guys, well, glad to see y'all.